It's time for Breaking Brad, Episode 3, featuring Jason Calacanis, angel investor and podcaster at Launch, interviewed by Brad Gerstner, CEO and founder of Altimeter Capital.
Jason, thanks for joining us.
Brad?
This isn't the Marina Bay Sands, but I'll take it.
Yeah, here we are on Zoom, our dystopian life.
Indeed. Let's get right down to it. You know, given that panel that we just heard on Asia, you know, we're in the middle of this global pandemic. Did this thing start in China, and did they cover anything up?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't talk too much about my time in the CIA or any operations I'm doing for the Mossad right now. But yeah, it's obviously, at this point, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It matters here in the United States, at least, we really figure out how to get the things that Asia actually does do right, which is testing and tracing, which I know this sounds crazy to a global audience, but we don't have testing and tracing online 10 months later. And it's, you know, it really is, I think, for those of us who think of America and American exceptionalism, a wake-up call. If you don't have proper management in your company, we didn't have proper management for the last 4 years. Hopefully, starting January 20th, we will have proper management. We're just not executing at the level people expect America to execute at. And it's a real shame because rapid testing, tracing, I mean, we don't even have a national app for tracing. And these are very simple things. So it's a wake-up call for America, but I feel like we got lucky this time because this virus seems to be, unlike other ones, and I'm no scientist, pretty survivable. It's tragic. We're going to lose hundreds of thousands of lives, but if this thing had a case fatality rate that was more similar to, other diseases we've seen,
Ebola.
We could be Ebola, the obvious one, right? Yeah. I mean, we could be talking about millions of people dead. And so a lot of lessons here. Thank God that, young people are not as impacted by old people. Imagine if it was the reverse for a second. Yeah, imagine if young people died and it didn't affect old people. We'd be sitting here scared to death about our children and keeping them isolated. So I feel like, this is the dry run that we need to be prepared for. And we need to be better. And it really is a lesson in operational excellence, which we do not have in our government right now. It's quite the opposite. We have dysfunction.
We've had massive news this week, and this is obviously one of the most important travel conferences of the year. A global audience of CEOs, founders, those interested in travel and travel distribution. And there's been nothing more impactful in the 20 years that I've been coming to this conference than a global pandemic. And frankly, that includes September 11th, that includes SARS, that includes the norovirus, that includes lots of other episodes of dislocation.
Yeah.
But this week we had massive news. Moderna and Pfizer obviously had some big announcements. Let me just run you through this timeline. So Moderna is run by a classmate of mine from business school. On January 11th, the Chinese posted the genetic sequence of COVID. January 11th. In 2 days, Moderna had developed a computer model of their mRNA vaccine. 25 days after they developed that model, they produced the first doses of the vaccine. And 10 days later, they sent it to the NIH for testing. Right? What does that tell you? So we know all the things the government has gotten wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that within a period of 45 days, we had decoded the genetic sequence of this virus, and we had produced a novel vaccine that we now know is 95% effective with zero side effects. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells me something very clear. While we are executing at a very low level in our government, in the private sector, and in science and technology, we're operating at an elite level, and that we actually underestimate the innovative and the creativity of the human spirit. And I think that one of the positive things that will come out of this global pandemic is that when we look at something really acute like global warming, we can actually start to think about global warming as something we can solve. if we can solve this pandemic, we can solve global warming. And we know that we can solve pollution with it, because when we were sheltering in place, all of a sudden people could see mountain ranges that were previously out of sight. And we know that we can produce electric cars, and we know that we have scientists and technology and an incentive system in capitalism that is extremely effective. So it makes me feel, the vaccine specifically, that we can produce, these vaccines so quickly with such efficacy, and those are but two, right? And we're talking about, a dozen or two more that'll probably be happening. This thing's going to be in our rearview mirror very quickly. And I think the idea that there would ever be another global pandemic is something we should aspire to, is a zero pandemic world. We should have the early warning system, and we should be acting globally, all leaders, that when there is the sign of a pandemic, we know how to shut down borders very quickly. Sorry to say this at a travel conference, so that we can play the long game economically. And we know to shut down borders. We know how to do test and trace. We know how to do masks. We know how to decode, make vaccines, et cetera, and contain these things before they get out of control, and destroy lives and destroy economies. And we have to work together.
Well, certainly for a travel conference, we know this is going to happen again.
Of course, 100%.
Right? We know this is going to happen again. I think what to me is so encouraging about the fact that we're using an mRNA technology that we've developed for other purposes, really for genetic modification over the course of the past 20 years, is now computers in a predictive way will be able to respond extraordinarily quickly, right, to the variants that will invariably come out of this. Yeah. Right. And so rather than having to sit here and everybody goes into their basements, the second a pin drops, the next time we hear of an outbreak in China, we can have some level of confidence and hopefully some preparedness around the way our biopharma community can respond, which I think is truly extraordinary.
Also, personal responsibility comes into this. So it sounds silly, but washing your hands, wearing a mask, not flying when you're sick. I mean, this is something the airlines, for profit reasons, would never let you change your flight. And if you said, well, I'm sick, I don't want to get other people sick, they would say, well, pay us $250, we'll let you fly on tomorrow's flight. And they looked at it as an opportunity to extract money while putting their customers at risk. Right. So how on earth can an airline justify this? It's short-term thinking, right? And so airlines need to do what I guess, Southwest or JetBlue or some of them have,
well, they've now all canceled their change policies around this. Right. So hopefully we're in a new world order on this. So there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of churning in the markets today about whether or not we're going to be able to get this distribution right with respect to these vaccines. A lot of uncertainty, obviously, about the transition of power in the government. But I want to ask you to look into your crystal ball.
Yeah.
Knowing all of those uncertainties, you spend your life thinking about probabilities and making bets on that. So think about the pace of recovery as we enter 2021. I'm going to pick a date, May 1st. Is the new normal on May 1st going to feel like it does today, or is it going to feel a lot more like the old normal?
Yeah, I would say much closer to the old normal. I'm an optimist. And I think, a lot of the problem we had here in the United States, I can't speak for every country, was that people just wouldn't wear their masks. It really was that simple. I mean, and people were making it into a political issue. That's going to end on January 20th. There's no way Trump's staying in power. That's over. And I think the media loves drama. They've benefited. I was a member of the media previously before being an investor for a living. And the media needs a story to cover. And I think that they just create, they fill that space. Now, Trump filled that space pretty easily, but now we're like, oh my God, we can't distribute the vaccine. It's like, calm down, everybody, pump the brakes. We can distribute the vaccine. If I said right now, we need all the dry ice you can get, and we're going to pay, 10 times the amount of dry ice, people would figure out how to make dry ice. Just create the incentive. We've got a zillion Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and Amazon couriers who could drive this around. We will get it done. If you asked Americans to volunteer to get the vaccine distributed, they would do it for free. So the spirit is there, the incentives are there, and we'll get that done. And it obviously works. And, there's
so
some
if you think of for the travel industry, if you think of 2019 revenues for the industry as a baseline. Yeah. So United's revenues in 2019, Expedia's revenues in 2019, et cetera. When do we get back to those run rates? When does, Because I'll give you two scenarios. One scenario is the people are going to drag their feet. There'll still be some concerns. Not everybody will get vaccinated. There'll still be, people who get sick, even though this is no longer at pandemic levels. And so that, maybe we'll get to, 80% of the run rate by the end of next year. There's another school of thought that we have so much pent up demand that people are ready to run through brick walls to go, to get away from their kids and homeschooling and go spend time with their friends. Which camp are you in?
I'm team YOLO. You only live once. I think we're going to have a collective YOLO moment in the second half of next year where the demand is going to be bonkers. People are going to say, I've never stayed in a Amman hotel. I've never been to Tokyo. I've never seen Kyoto. I've never been to Sydney. I've never dove the Great Barrier Reef or wherever it is. And they're going to take this money they've saved. We have savings occurring and they're going to take time off. And they're also going to work remote. I think working remote and travel is something that people don't talk about, but really, I think one of the things that I think about is I don't think about travel in isolation. I think about working remote and work life and this wanderlust people have, plus travel, plus housing, right? And so there is going to be this great migration of people who want to, now that they're allowed to work from home, in fact, they're going to be encouraged to work from home, even if they are allowed back into the offices. Companies are going to say, you can work from home. Well, we want to save the office space. And so there's going to be this great wanderlust where I think what we see with Barbados, and I guess they're giving people the ability to go there for a year free. What young people are doing with, remote years, I think this is going to become something adults do and families do. And this wanderlust is continue. So I think it's, the results in 2022 is going to blow the doors off of people's expectations. I think the second half of 2021, you start to see that. And I'm super optimistic about this. If you look at what the NBA did with their bubble, it's pretty instructive, right? Like you can create a bubble, or Australia or Hawaii or the islands of Hawaii. You can actually see how a bubble can be created, and rapid testing is going to be a big piece of this. And then also, people are willing to take a certain amount of risk, and some people choose to smoke. Some people go mountain climbing. Other people go skiing. I think this pandemic, when the vaccine comes out, it's going to be a bit of a Darwinian moment for humanity. People who choose not to take the vaccine may be choosing to take themselves out of the gene pool. It's that simple.
I was talking to the CEO of an event. I was going to ask you when in-person conferences will occur. Again, I was talking to Marion, the CEO of Burning Man, yesterday about Burning Man 2021,
100%
about what the boundary conditions might be. Like you may say you can't come to Burning Man unless you've taken the vaccine.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's a perfect example. And the vaccine is not expensive, and you have to have the vaccine, or you have to get tested, and be at the gate for 24 hours and take 3 tests. I mean. Right. What the NBA did is what our government should have been able to do. And I think what I'm seeing in private parties and private events with people who were able to acquire rapid tests from Asia is that people were, affluent people. Like we saw Governor Newsom was at a private dinner. People are making a big deal out of it. I'm guessing they probably had rapid tests at that dinner. They took a rapid test. They'd all been tested that day. They had the door open, and it was probably low risk. So what might not be equally distributed is personal responsibility and the rapid testing. Right. And once that rapid testing is out there, I think it changes everybody's risk assessment. And there is always going to be risk. But if this thing is not that risky, and we know social distancing works, we know masks work, I think we're in the end game right now, and I'm super optimistic.
So I'm just looking at the time, and I'm not nearly as good at this craft as you are. So we got to jam. Great. To get through some things. Angel investing, okay?
Yep.
You wrote the book Angel.
Yep.
You've declared yourself the greatest angel investor of all time.
Sure, why not?
Jason, what makes you the best?
Well, listen, I'm probably the best active right now. There's probably 5 or 6 that nobody knows that have done better than me, and some that people do know, like Chris Sacca and Ron Conway, and Bill Lee. So I bet on founders, and I take the long list of why a company will fail, and I rip it up. And I think about the reasons why it might succeed, and I focus on those and the founders who are focused on those. And it's worked really well in terms of being the 3rd or 4th investor in Uber, Robinhood, Thumbtack, Wealthfront, and 200 other companies, 7 of which, could wind up becoming public companies. So I might have 7 public companies in the first 100 angel investments, 150. And really, I think it has to do with the network I've built, where I'm located. So I do think about where I'm located and if that has an impact on this in the future, if founders are not based in the Bay Area, because that has certainly been an advantage for me in the last couple of years. And I think it's really about optimism and believing something can overcome the obstacles. And you really need to place a lot of bets. So this is very different than hedge fund investing or public market investing. If I told you you're going to make 30 public market investments, 25 are going to zero and 3 are going to be doubles. And then 1 or 2 are going to be 100x, 200, 2000x. You say that's no way to live. I don't want to be part of that madness. Well, that's what I do for a living, and it takes being willing to strike out a lot to be a home run hitter. So I'm sort of like a, Steph Curry type 3-point shooter, maybe even 10 feet beyond the 3-point line in how I approach the game. And it pays off, but you have to have a certain mentality and a wherewithal to get through what they call that J curve. A lot of pain and suffering in those early years.
You were one of Sequoia's best ever scouts.
The
Sequoia,
best.
the venerable
Not one
venture
of the best,
capital
the
firm.
best.
What?
Number one Sequoia scout ever.
Okay, number one ever. Why didn't they hire you?
Yeah, I had an opportunity. I wouldn't talk specifically about Sequoia, but I had an opportunity to work at a lot of venture firms. And as I told people, like, you probably don't want this bull in your china shop, and I'm more of a solo act. I think I'm outspoken, so that can have blowback. But putting that aside, some people were like, we're willing to take that risk. I'm not talking about Sequoia here. I'm just talking generally. But I think what I do for a living, which is investing in 3-person companies, 2-person companies, if you talk about the investment, you will inevitably talk yourself out of it. Whereas what you do for a living, when you're investing in, United or whatever you had a huge position in, sorry about that. I mean, that must have been pretty brutal, but I think you had Snowflake too. So I don't know how you sleep at night. It must be very weird in your household. Nightmares and then, like these incredible dreams. But, I don't like to debate the investment. And what firms do is they debate the investments, and they have this real process of debating. And what I have a process and a factory for is engaging at the earliest stages and making the bets and not debating them. I tell my team, tell me heck yes or heck no. And that's it. I don't want anything in between. Either you are all in on the company and you want to do it and you want to take the 100K bet, or you don't. Just tell me one or the other, because we don't care if you're wrong. It doesn't matter if you're wrong. It just matters if you're right sometimes.
What are the top 3 Series A venture firms in the world today?
Well, I mean, Sequoia and Benchmark have the best track records, I think, and then up and coming. I would have to say Kraft, my friend David Sachs, who had arguably a better Series A, Series B portfolio than I did. I probably had an edge on the angel investing. So those would be the top 3. Andreessen Horowitz has a lot of money under management, but not the performance of those other firms. So I think they're notable and they write big checks, but maybe don't have the same excellence yet. Maybe they need another decade or 2 to kind of refine their game. Or
Elon Musk.
Else. Yeah.
Elon Musk, he's your buddy.
Great friend,
I think you bought the first Roadster.
I had the 16th Roadster and the first Model S. Yeah.
Okay. So, do you hang out with Elon?
All the time. Yeah.
Okay.
For 20 years.
Does he ask you for advice?
All the time. Yeah. We talk about stuff. Sure.
So Tesla is now worth $450 billion. SpaceX is worth $40 billion. He's the top 5 richest person in the world.
He is really.
And I saw a comment the other day that he made where he said, it's not with the expectation of great success that I started Tesla or SpaceX. It's just that I thought they were important enough to do so anyway. Riff on that.
Yeah, it's a true statement. I mean, he invested his life's fortune into those 2 companies and he went broke. And he had no money during the financial crisis. And I will only tell this story because he's told it publicly many times. I wouldn't speak out of school about a friend, but he ran out of money. And he was living on a loan from a mutual billionaire friend of ours who was just giving him some money. And we went out one night and he just texted me, hey, or BlackBerry'd me, whatever, messaged me and said, hey, you want to get a steak? And we went out and had steak, and just the 2 of us. And it was during the financial crisis. And I said, hey, how's it going? And I could tell, if a friend is not doing well, and he's like, I said, I saw the story, in the news that Tesla only has 4 weeks of cash left. And he goes, it's not true. I said, oh, thank God. He goes, we have 2 weeks. I said, you have 2 weeks of cash left? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, wow. And then I was like, well, how's the rocket ship company going? He's like, well, we blew up 2 and the next launch is next week. We're going to go watch it. And I said, what happens if that blows up? He goes, no more SpaceX. I said, so you're broke and you have 2 weeks left in one company. And if you don't blow up this rocket, you're done for life. You're finished. You're zero. He said, yeah. I said, well, I have a couple $1,000,000 I can give you, loan you, whatever. He said, don't bother. It doesn't matter. I said, certainly there's got to be some good news. It's got to be some hope here. What are you hopeful about? And he said, well, there is one thing. And he took out his BlackBerry and he showed me the Model S clay, made out of clay. They make cars out of clay, I guess, in the early days. And he said, don't tell anybody, but he started swiping on the little ball on the BlackBerry. This is to date the conversation. And he showed me the Model S. And I said, what can you make that for? And he said, oh, I think I can make it for 50 grand. I said, if you make that car for 50 grand, you change the world forever. You can't die. You have to figure out a way to save these companies. He said, yeah, I'm trying. So I went home and I wrote 2 checks for $50,000 each. And I wrote, hey, pal, if you make that car, it's going to change the world. I'll take 2. And I put 2 $50,000 checks and signed them in there to Tesla Inc. And I kissed the checks. And I told Jade, my wife, that 100K is going to keep Tesla afloat for like 1.5 days, like 12 hours.
Right.
But I feel good sending the 100K. And he famously closed the money for Tesla and saved the company. And he famously got the rocket ship into orbit. And he's suffered. That's the thing, people have to realize is these 2 companies have been pain and suffering and nothing has been easy. And the markets have bet against him. And I've told people like on CNBC many times, like, dude, this is the last person in the world you would want to bet against. I mean, this is like Russell Crowe in Gladiator. Do you want to get in the arena with this person? When they're holding a sword and you've got a fork, like you're going to get murdered. Do not bet against Elon Musk under any circumstances. He's got a savage, wherewithal and an intellect that is really very strong. But those 2 companies, almost broke him. And it's just great to see him have this success. It's well-deserved, obviously. And the punchline to the story is, 6 months later, the checks did get cashed. And then 3 years later, I got an email. Your reservation number is 000001 for the Model S and 000073. And I forwarded him. I said, you can't give me number 1. And he said, you ordered it first.
So Jason, what happens when they tell me my time is up? Does that mean in the interview world it's really up?
You just keep going.
They say now I got a 1-minute warning. So here's what
I hope that was a good story. Yeah,
I got a couple big topics I want to hit. Okay. Glenn Fogel's coming up next, the CEO of Booking.com.
Yeah.
Airbnb's coming public here shortly. They raised money 4 years ago at a $30 billion valuation. They're hoping to get that valuation when they go public. At the same level of room nights as Booking.com, Booking.com was making a few billion in earnings, and Airbnb is still not making any money. Is it a reflection of the profligate ways of Silicon Valley that they spend too much money? Is that the problem going on with Airbnb?
Yeah, I think what we look for in the private markets is growth, and we know profitability can come later. We've seen this with companies like Amazon. So it is now the playbook. And the perfect playbook is have, rabid, insane growth and then become public and then add that discipline to, hit break even.
So did they wait too long to go public?
Oh, certainly. And I think SPACs and what Chamath is doing will take these companies from going public in years 10, 11, 12 back down to 6, 7, 8. We need more public companies. I'm an investor in a company called Robinhood, which does trading for millennials and, fee-free trading. And I think it's proof that there is a market for retail investors, and there should be twice as many public companies, and people should be betting on companies as opposed to betting on sports, right? Like, no offense to people who bet on sports, but I like the idea that there's people betting on companies and betting on the future and betting on people like Elon or Uber or Bookings or Airbnb. More public companies.
Lightning round, Jason. Lightning round. You can only go long or short. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
Virgin Galactic.
Oh, long for sure. People are going to love that.
SPACs.
Mixed, but I'll go long. I'm long on them. Yes. I'm concerned about bad inventory.
Zuckerberg.
Short.
Another Trump in the White House.
Not in our lifetime. Short.
San Francisco.
Absolute, complete, unmitigated disaster. There's nothing I could be shorter on right now than the future of that city.
Homeschool.
Long on micro schools. Long on micro schools. Yes. Doing it right now.
Burning Man 2021.
I'm desperately motivated for it to be long on that. So I'm going long again. Positivity. Yes.
Jason, we couldn't be more thrilled. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Really enjoyed your comments. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Talk to you soon.